I want to flesh out something that I always find fascinating in military history, because it's easy to look back at history and sort of be a little bit detached and kind of dehumanize it and just look at the events and how they played out through history. But I like really humanizing the history and putting myself in the shoes of the people who were there. And I think one of the things that always fascinates me with the downfall of armies and defeat is ego and its role in warfare. And we really see this here. I mean, with Burgoyne and his inflated sense of ego and his overconfidence, with Gates and Schuyler and Arnold and all their bickering. And obviously, you're much more of a military expert than I am, but it seems to me that ego is more often than not the downfall of armies. What can you say to ego and greed when it comes to war?
Yeah. Yeah, maybe instead of greed, ambition might be
Yeah,
a better
for
word.
sure,
But
for
but
sure.
yeah, you're right. Um, yeah. On the other hand, I think you're absolutely right, and you certainly see it here, as you said, throughout the campaign. And the Americans certainly aren't immune to that. The British have all these problems. All the they Carlton and Germain absolutely despise each other. Howe and Germain will end up despising each other. Howe and Clinton hate each other, and Clinton is Howe's second in command. So I mean that's a problem, obviously. About the only two guys who really like each other on the British side are Clinton and Burgoyne. But even that's a problem because Clinton thinks he should have commanded that expedition because he had date of rank on. He was slightly senior to Burgoyne. So I mean, they just had a poisonous relationship amongst all these senior officers, and that had to play that did play a role clearly. The Americans did too, as you said. Gates basically has very little respect for Washington by this point, and he's very, very ambitious. He thinks he's better than Washington. He's angling for this independent command, which is one of the reasons why he when he's sent up to command Ticonderoga, he instead installs himself as the Northern Commander in Chief there in Albany instead, in Schuyler's absence. And then you have Schuyler pouting about I'm not being treated well enough, so he runs down to whine to Congress. And then of course Arnold and the famous quarrel between Arnold and Gates, they actually worked very, very well together up till that point. They had worked very, very well together in the 1776 campaign. In fact, Gates basically saves Arnold's career during that period because people are very jealous of Arnold, and they're trying to take him down. They're accusing him of all sorts of malfeasance and uh, you know uh, basically inflating his expenses and all this other stuff. And Gates basically protects Arnold. Arnold is thrilled when when Schuyler is relieved by Gates. So they get along very well. It's only after that first battle that they start coming to they start butting heads. So the Americans have their own problems, but I think the fact that the Americans had the easier strategic um, challenge, they're able to overcome those personality issues, and the British just aren't. But you're absolutely right. I think that's definitely a problem. I think ego can be a problem. It can get in the way of things, clearly. But then again, on the other hand, when you look at the great captains in history, and by great captains I mean really great commanders, I would put Washington up there.
For sure.
I would, obviously, the Napoleons and the Marlboroughs and
Patton
Patton,
had a huge
absolutely.
ego.
Yeah, exactly. All those guys have huge egos. And it's just the guys that can control it and channel those egos. They're the ones that are able to come out on top. You've got other guys like I would say Gates is one of those who had this huge ego and this huge level of ambition. He's not able to do that. Um, and I think one of the things with Gates. Um, it's interesting reading some of the reviews of the book, not the formal reviews, but like on Amazon and things like that. And there's people who are out there saying, "Oh, you're a Gates lover, and you think Gates is great. I think he stinks, or whatever." And I don't know how you can read my book and say I'm a Gates lover at all. But I think I'm trying to be fair with Gates. And I think what the problem, as you mentioned just a few minutes ago, and I think you're exactly right, Jake. You're talking about how people, you have to be really fair to these guys. You have to put yourself in their shoes and not think about what happens later. And I think Gates's problem, or Gates's curse maybe, is a lot of historians have looked at Gates in the Saratoga campaign through the lens of what happens after Saratoga, when he, has that disastrous Battle of Camden, and he's basically trying to overthrow Washington in the
Yeah, he
period.
was also involved in the Conway
The
Cabal, right?
Conway Cabal, right? And I think historians are they, but you can't do that. You got to look at Gates at the time. Those things happen later, and you have to look at what he did during the campaign. And I'm plenty critical of him in this campaign, but in the end, I think his skill set fit the circumstances that he inherited, and fit them perfectly. And he was the right guy for that moment in time.
Yeah, 100%. I think that's the right approach. I think looking at history through hindsight is a big mistake because we have these biases of sort of how events shaped us and the way we look at things, and then we look at how history played out in the future and apply that to the events that took place before. So I do think it's very important to be as objective as possible and look at the events in the tense that they were taking place and not have these biases of future events and our own biases.
Yeah,
But
and it's hard. I mean, it is
Mhm.
hard to do that, but
Yeah.
you have to try to force yourself to do it.
Yeah, I think that's a great point you made earlier, though, is what sets great commanders apart is their ability to control their ego. Because guys like Napoleon and Patton and Washington, they definitely have large egos. I mean, what what's the term for like short people? They have Napoleon syndrome because of their
Napoleon
ego.
complex, yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
Napoleon complex. There's a whole like phrase because of it. But the great commanders are able to channel that energy into achievement versus pettiness and you know, getting at their peers because they wrong them in some way.